you here. So good to be connected, and I think we got a great program today. Let me introduce you to Beth McGinnis. She is a nationally certified interpreter. She's taught sign language interpretation for many, many years in the Holland area. She got an associate's degree from Lansing Community College, and she also has a BA in music. And she has a very interesting story she'll share with you about how she transitioned from music into sign language. I'm sure everyone will be glad to hear that. Anyway, I think that she's got a wealth of experience and a lot of good things to share with us. So I'm going to turn everything over to her now. Thank you for being here, Beth.
Come in. Oh, let me turn my mute button off. Good morning. My name is Beth McGinnis. That's what I just told all of you in sign language just a moment ago. So thank you for joining my presentation today, and I hope that you enjoy it. I'm going to start sharing my screen. You're right here. You are in Sign Language 101 with me today. And I will start by giving another introduction of myself. There we go. This is my agenda for today. I'll be giving you an introduction to me and to sign language interpreters. I will give you a little bit of deaf culture. And then I will be teaching you the ABCs and some brief conversational sign language. And then I'll open it up to questions and answers at the end. So I would like to start by saying that initially I was a Hope College vocal music ed major back in 1990 and was going through school, having a good time. But when I got to my senior year, I decided that teaching music was not what I wanted to do. So then I moved back home in with my parents, who said, well, hey, you like sign language. So let me back up and explain that. The first year that I was at Hope College, I had two roommates. I was in Dykstra, where you could have two roommates. And one of them was, excuse me, one of them was hard of hearing. So my friend and I, Jennifer, started up a deaf club at Hope College, the first of its kind. And Louise Shoemaker was our faculty advisor at the time. So we did this club every week, learning more, signs. And so when I moved back home, my mom reminded me that I enjoyed sign language. And so I thought, well, I didn't realize I could get a degree in using sign language or becoming an interpreter. I'd never heard of that, had never been exposed to that. The only deaf people that I'd ever met were maybe my family members that wore hearing aids, so they would be considered hard of hearing. So anyway, there was a program at Lansing Community College, which I enrolled in and found out that that really matched my personality. And I have been interpreting ever since 1996 when I graduated from there. Plus, I did go to Michigan State University. Since I was so close with the music degree from Hope College, I decided to finish a Bachelor of Arts at Michigan State University. Found out later was important because I couldn't take my national test without having a bachelor's degree in something. So that turned out to be beneficial. And then I initially, upon graduating from Lansing Community College, I started substituting as an interpreter for Dearborn Public School System in their high school. And after 1 year of experience, I then, because before I subbed and then they hired me, I had no certification whatsoever other than a degree, an interpreter training program from Lansing Community College. So they hired me with basically that only credential. Because I had taken a state test. At the time, it was called the Quality Assurance Test. And I missed it by 2 points. So I then, after that year working at Dearborn, went back and retested, passed it with a level 1, and then ended up moving to Ionia, where I then subbed at Central Montcalm, and that's when I went to Michigan State, and also interpreted at Montcalm Community College. And then, with the help of my mother-in-law, who I think is here today, she discovered that there was a job opening at Holland Public Schools for a full-time sign language interpreter. So after I graduated from Michigan State, I applied and I worked for Holland Public Schools from the fall of 1999 until 2013. And it was after that point, they had fewer kids and too many interpreters. So I ended up leaving Holland Public and freelance interpreting. So I had done, other assignments like in the evenings and weekends, interpreting for members of the deaf community. But I, consistently worked for the school system until 2013. But after that point, I worked for a video relay service, and that could be a whole nother topic for another day, but I'll just briefly say that basically deaf and hard of hearing people have the ability to use what's called a video phone, much like you see us here today. And they would see an interpreter when making a phone call, and that interpreter would interpret a phone call between them and, say, their doctor, or maybe a lawyer or someone, maybe another family member. So they would see the interpreter signing, which would be the hearing person that they're speaking. And then I would voice for them because I could see them signing to me. So that I was a video relay service interpreter for quite a while. And then in 2010, I decided, after I'd taken that state test, the QA test, which had 3 levels, level 1, 2, and 3, and 3 was the highest you could go. But working with colleagues in the video relay service, which was called Sorensen at the time, I had a lot of colleagues that had already taken their national test, and I felt encouraged to do it at that time. Plus, the state of Michigan was moving away from the QA, or quality assurance test, and moving to what they now have, BEI. And I can't remember what that acronym stands for. Board of Educational Interpreters, I believe, is what it stands for. And rather than taking the new state test, I just went straight and passed the national certification test, which meant that I could interpret anywhere in the United States, not just in Michigan. And then as time went on, the state of Michigan started requiring interpreters to have special endorsements in order to interpret in specific situations. It used to be that once you were nationally certified, you could interpret in any situation that you felt comfortable in. But in, I think it was 2014, there was a law that was in process and then passed that said you need to have specific endorsements. So I decided to, in 2016, go for the medical and mental health endorsement, because I found that most of my freelance jobs in the community really centered around medical and mental health. So I have that endorsement. There's also a legal endorsement, which I thought about, but at this point, it's enough to keep up with the medical vocabulary, because in interpreting, there's specific vocabulary depending on where you interpret. There was an educational endorsement. However, there's also a separate test for educational interpreting. So, and then there's also a deaf-blind endorsement, which I am considering exploring more of that. So, let's see. So I'd like to venture into some deaf culture, just to let you know how ASL, or American Sign Language, became a language. I'd like to explain what capital D and small d deaf means. I'd also like to share with you some signs and how sports has been a factor in a developing sign language. And then little off topic, but another part of the deaf culture is just basically how to get the attention of someone. If you encounter someone that is deaf or hard of hearing, what should you do? What shouldn't you do? That's the next part. So these pictures that I found show some very important gentlemen that helped to develop American Sign Language. So Thomas H. Gallaudet is shown in the top as well as in the bottom picture, met this young girl. Her name is Alice, and she was, 5, 6 years old, and she was playing in the dirt, not interacting with other children her age. So Thomas learned that she couldn't hear, but he wanted to attempt to communicate with her. So he knelt down next to her in the sand and started drawing, making letters and whatnot. And so because of her and him wanting to, knowing that she had a brain, knowing that she was smart and intelligent, wanted to develop a language in order to communicate with her and others like her. So he heard about a program in Europe. He initially went to England where they had a program, but they would not let him in. However, he met this other man, clerk, and he is deaf from France. So, and he was head of a program in France that were signing, but in French Sign Language. So Thomas Gallaudet and Laurent Clerc, on a long boat ride from France back to the United States, created American Sign Language. So it is a language with syntax and grammar. And I'm hoping that in the future, more colleges accept them. There's some colleges that do and some that do not. But at any rate, American Sign Language is comprised of 60% English and 40% French, or I've got it backwards, but 60 and 40% of English and or French language. So when sentences in English are interpreted in ASL, they have a structure that's Spanish as well, whereas the noun comes first and the adjective comes second. So if you're talking about a red ball, you would sign a ball, you point to it and it's red, rather than signing a red ball. You could sign that, but that is more towards an English version of American Sign Language. So, so that's one of the aspects. Another is that American Sign Language is a picture language. So you're really setting the stage. If I was to describe the room I'm sitting in, I would talk about the desk that I'm sitting in front of. I would then set up what's on my desk, my laptop, and then my tea mug is over here. So I would kind of set up the room. I have a picture that's set up over here, and I have a candle that's set up over there. So it's a very visually descriptive language. So let's see, moving on. The next concept that I learned going to school was that there's a difference amongst people that are deaf or hard of hearing. First of all, the term hearing impaired, while it sounds like it's a very politically correct term to use for anyone that has a hearing loss, there are members of the deaf community, which I'll get into, that actually resist that term. They would prefer to be called either deaf or hard of hearing or deaf blind. So those are the terms that they would prefer to hear versus hearing impaired, because they view that term as something that a hearing person came up with and not from the deaf community. So, so the culturally deaf, or the capital D deaf, means that you are probably a person that was born deaf. You probably have deaf parents, you went to a residential school, which there's one in every state in the United States. Ours happens to be in Flint, called the Michigan School for the Deaf. And there's always stories to share. And those are whenever I encounter a culturally capital D deaf person, I'll introduce myself and my name. They'll introduce themselves and their name, where they went to school, how many members of their family, all of their ailments. I mean, you just get everything in that first encounter, because that is, again, part of the culture. So the small d deaf, on the other hand, is someone who became deaf later in life or has lost some hearing. So that is the main difference between a culturally deaf, capital D deaf, and a small d deaf, is that there's a lot of culture, history with someone who is culturally deaf versus someone who lost their hearing later in life. Let's see. Now in the sports arena, a lot of sign language has been credited to being invented due to sports situations. For example, in football, as you can see in my picture, there's the football huddle. Now, the reason why, from what I understand, that there is a huddle in football is because of the Gallaudet football team not wanting to share their secrets with the other opposing football team. And so that's why they got into this huddle, so they could hide their signs so the other team wouldn't be able to see and, potentially figure out their plan. So the huddle was influenced by a deaf quarterback from Gallaudet. There it is, back in 1890. And that quarterback's name is Paul Hubbard. And then baseball is another sport that's heavily influenced with signs. And if you've watched a baseball game, you'll see the umpire make a lot of signals like, strike, out, safe. Those are all credited to a professional baseball player. His nickname is Dummy, but Dummy Hoy taught his teammates sign language, or they learned sign language to communicate with him. And he did, invent the sign for out, and then strike, and either safe or safe, but safe. So I found that fascinating to learn as I was going to school. So if you encounter someone who's deafblind, or hard of hearing, these are ways to get their attention. A nice way is just tapping the shoulder, upper arm area. You need to be careful not to startle them because they don't hear, feet walking necessarily, or, if you start saying their name, they won't hear that. But if you tap them, that helps to get their attention. Look at each other face to face. That's the easiest way for someone, to be able to read your facial expressions, to be able to do some lip reading. And on that topic with lip reading, there are deaf and hard of hearing people that can lip read. However, statistics show that the best lip readers only really get 30% of what is being said, because there are so many words that have the same consonant look. If you can't, hear like B and P look the same. And it's the only difference is a voice sound or a soft sound, versus a B. So at any rate, whenever the question is asked, did they read lips? Potentially so, but if you go off into subjects that they're not expecting or change topics frequently, then it's that much harder to read lips. Another way to get attention, if you are far away from them and don't want to, you can flick a light switch on and off. And if you do that in the presence of a deaf or hard of hearing, or, and in some cases, deaf blind individuals, they will look around like, what's going on? Because that's a visual attention cue. So flicking a light switch is another way. Sometimes, well, most times, if I have clients that are deaf or hard of hearing, if I stomp on the floor, that'll get their attention. And in extreme cases, hitting a table, there they'll feel that vibration. So, and then another way to get attention is just kind of, waiting to get their attention as well. So this would not be a way to get someone's attention. I found this picture and found it funny. It's not necessarily that you need to speak louder in order to communicate with someone that has a hearing loss. It's rather better to, like I said, face them, get their attention, and make sure that you have eye contact. So, all right. With that, I'm done talking for a little bit. And I'd like for you to get out your homework if you have it. I believe you all maybe received this sign language alphabet. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to go through each letter. And the other thing I want to say is that if it hurts to make your fingers and hands make these shapes, then don't do it. But I encourage you to try, because another great way to communicate with someone who can't communicate any other way is by spelling. So this would be a great survival sign language alphabet for all of you. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen because I'd rather see all of you. So if you have your screens, your video off, I would love the video to come on. And I'm gonna stop sharing the screen a minute. And then I just want to practice with you the ABCs. All right, so here's our first letter. It's the letter A, and your thumb should be on the outside of your fist. And then the letter B. And then you can face your palm away from yourself, like face it towards the camera of your computer. So not necessarily this way, but face it out this way. Okay, so there's a B, good. And then C. D. You know, see, it almost kind of looks like a D, but I have.
Does it matter if you use your left or right hand?
Oh, that's a good question. If you are right-handed, like you write with your right hand, I encourage you to use your right hand. And if you're left-handed, then use your left hand. So there's D. Good. Here's the letter E. And like all of your fingers should be on top of your thumb. Here's the letter F. So it kind of looks like, okay, but F. And then the letter G, I'm going to show you a couple angles. The letter G has your thumb and your pointer finger sticking out. H. Yep, very good. That one, you know, definitely it's more comfortable to do this way. Sometimes people will do that way and don't do it. This is the right way to do H. The letter I is just your pinky up. And then the letter J is you're going to take that pinky and draw the letter J. I know there's a lot of J names here today, so letter J. Now the letter K, I'm going to suggest put your two fingers up like this and then take your thumb put it in between them and have Mr. Tallman stick out a little bit. Probably one of the hardest ones. Very good. Okay. And then L looks just like an L. M, 3 fingers curled over your thumb there, M. And then N is 2 fingers over your thumb. O. Now, remember how we made K? I want you to point it down so your pointer finger is shooting right towards your camera. That is the letter P. Okay, and then remember the letter G that I showed you with your index finger and your thumb pointing out. If you point both of those down to the floor, that is the letter Q. The letter R is you cross your pointer finger and toe man. And then S, as you make that fist and your thumb is right in front of your fist. All right, good. The letter T is your thumb in between your pointer finger and your tall man middle finger. So I'm going to hold mine closer. It looks kind of like a T. All right. And then the letter U is both your fingers up. And I kind of imagine a U. And then V, open up those 2 fingers. That one's a pretty easy one, I think, the letter V. And then W, take 1 more finger out. So right now my thumb is touching my pinky, but my other 3 fingers are up. W. Now the letter X is you curl that pointer finger. So X marks the spot. Arg, it almost kind of looks like a hook. And then Y is your thumb and your pinky stretched out. And then with the letter Z, you take your pointer finger and draw a Z in the air. Z. All right, so shake out your arm because I know mine's starting to get tight. So you gotta shake your hands, shake them out. All right, so let me go run through that one more time without too much description. And then what I'd like you to do is practice spelling your name. So I'm gonna run through them again. So here's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. All right. That's my sign for clapping. Because again, deaf people can't hear that. So this is officially the sign for clapping in sign language. So now what I'd like to do is have you go into breakout rooms. And I want you to practice spelling your name to just a few people. This is a, kind of a huge screen. So I think the breakout rooms would make it a little more intimate. So if I could have some help with putting people in breakout rooms to practice spelling your name, and I'll try to pop in and out of each of your rooms. Okay?
Yeah, I'm going to try to do that a second.
All right. So there will eventually be a screen that pops up.
How many people do you want in each room, Beth?
See, how many do we have?
There's 34.
34. So I'd say about 3 or 4 to a room would be fine.
Okay. Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Actually, hold on. Okay, it'll be more like 4 or 5 to a room. Is that okay?
That's okay. That's
Okay,
fine.
here we go, everybody.
Mhm.
Okay, I lost Beth. Hi, everybody. I think you're supposed to unmute and put your cameras on and practice sharing your letters.
Kim, are we all coming back?
Yes,
Okay. They do have 60 seconds.
in 19 seconds. Yeah, is that okay?
With the 4 of us, we did get through in our room.
Okay.
I don't know if the others may have had.
Okay, we can check. You can go ahead and ask them when they return, and if we need to go back, I can do that. I've made you a co-host too. I don't know. Did you have the ability to move around or not?
No, and I didn't have time. I stayed in the one room. So,
Okay.
all right. Are we all back?
31, so pretty close. Yep.
Okay, pretty close.
32. I don't have a ton of experience with the breakout room, so.
Gotcha. Are we back?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I'm wondering how it went. If you had enough time to make it through your name. I didn't get to go to every breakout room because I think we had just enough time to go through the small breakout room that I was in. So did you have enough time to practice your names? Hopefully.
We had technical difficulty in number 7, but Debbie and I are here together, so we practiced, but we never made the connection on group 7.
Oh, okay.
And in
Interesting.
group 3, we had, in group 3, we had a clock chiming, which meant that we could only see that person, and that person wasn't working on the sign language right at that moment. The clock sort of pulled that person's forward because of the noise.
Weird.
Huh.
I
Okay.
didn't get a copy of the alphabet because I just signed up too late.
Ah, gotcha.
We had only 2 in our group, Peg and me.
Oh.
If anybody still needs a copy of the alphabet, can you please email hasp@hope.edu and let us know that, and then we'll make sure we get it to you.
Yeah.
Beth, could I ask you one more time? I'm the one that asked about right-handed and left-handed. I'm still confused. Does your hand go to the person that you're signing with or to yourself?
It goes out away from you towards the person you're
Or is
communicating.
the person, okay, because I'm
Yes.
looking at the thing and it just. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Beth, quick question on the left-handed, right-handed thing. Is there a sheet that will flip it for us? Because see, we see a thumb and a small finger, and it would be easier to have one that flips. Do you know what I mean?
Let's see I was trying to figure out who's talking to me right now. Who just asked that question?
Linda Byrne.
Linda, oh, there you are, Linda. Okay. Can you repeat your question for me?
Okay, I'm left-handed, so I would prefer to learn using my left hand. But when you look at the sheet, I think it's set up for a right-handed person, and so you don't, you have to, the thumb.
Thanks for the shots.
Yeah, so you'll have to kind of flip it a little bit. Almost like it's a mirror image as I'm spelling the letters right now. So
Okay.
I have to flip a little bit. So Linda, is there a letter or more that I can help you with?
No, that's okay. I was just wondering if there was a sheet that would actually flip it, showing it flipped.
I guess I'd have to just do a little bit of research to see if there is a
Yeah.
flipped or left-handed version. I've never had that question before, so that I'm now curious. So
We also have a question in the chat, Beth. What do you do if you have a double letter in the middle of your name?
very good. So if you have a double letter, there's 2 choices you have. You can either slide it, like my last name is McGinnis, so I have 2 N's. So I can make an N and slide it, and that shows there's 2 N's. Or I can kind of tap it, N. So those are your 2 choices. Let's see. So Brenda, your last name has 2 T's. You can either do TT or TT. Good question.
Beth? Jean Giroux here.
Mhm.
I just have a question. It seems like when you watch someone sign, when I watch someone sign, for instance, when the governor's speaking and there's that person behind, it seems that most of that is a big picture of something, and I'm not sure how that communicates to someone who's deaf.
So yes, another aspect of interpreting actually is most of what I am interpreting is on my face, because deaf and hard of hearing people and deafblind people take those inflections, can't hear those subtleties in our voices when, to show. So that's when, as an interpreter, we need to show that expression. Really, most of what I interpret is actually on my face, and then a small portion of it is actually what I am signing. And like I was saying before, American Sign Language is a very visual picture-oriented language. And so things are usually set up out in space, you know, in front of us when we're describing.
So how would you communicate to me if I were deaf? The governor saying restrictions on restaurants will be eased.
Okay, so I would set up, there's the restaurants, you know, before limited, go, 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 now open more is how I would probably,
Okay,
because I would set up the actual, you know, the restaurants, the fact that, you know, before we would go to it, but there have been limits set up and now those limits, you know, are finished. It's open, can go to restaurants type of thing, so.
okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I have a Zoom question. When I look at my picture on my computer, it appears, I mean, I'm using my right hand, but I assume a lot of people work, and it's off to the right of my the screen I'm looking at. But most of the people in the audience that are also on Zoom, it appears that to me that they're using their left hands. So how, that's a Zoom setup. How do I, what do other people perceive my hand on their visual left or their visual right? This is my right hand.
Yeah.
But everybody else, it looks like they're doing the signing over here when I'm looking at my screen. So
Mhm.
how does that work?
I don't know what the answer is. I wonder if Kim or could that help me answer that question? I think there's a flip feature or something, right?
Right. So
We're
do I have
seeing
to
you the
flip
right
on
way.
Sorry, I
What?
missed the question. What was it?
it on when I'm looking at my screen myself? This is my right hand, and I
Okay.
look like it's my right hand. But
Yep.
most of the people that I'm observing, it looks like their right hand is over here on this other side, and I'm not. So I'm seeing the reverse of most people. Why is it? So I think that's a Zoom setup, and I don't know who's got the flip switch, me or them.
Interesting. Probably me as host, and I have no idea how to do that, but I will look into it.
Okay.
It's a very good question.
We see it correctly. You don't see it correctly because you're getting
A mirror image.
right, like a mirror. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting a mirror image,
Mhm.
but you see my hand off
To the right.
to the
Yep.
right, but I don't see it that way. Well, I see it on my right.
Right.
Mhm.
No, I see it on your left,
I see it on
the
your
left of the
left.
screen,
Right.
on the left of
That's
the
my
screen.
right hand. That's
There's
my
my
right
right
hand. And it's
Yeah,
on
it's to
the
the left of
side.
my screen.
Right.
And that, so what do I need to do to fix that?
You can't.
Oh.
There's no need to fix it.
No,
Okay.
it's not necessary.
Okay, thanks.
Beth,
Mhm.
I just need a quick review on the signs that on our paper kind of come out as just flat, you know?
Yes, yes.
So I need a quick review on G, H, P, and Q.
Those are, yes, probably the most difficult ones. So the
Okay,
letter G is your pointer finger and your thumb are,
this is G.
if you're right-handed, pointed towards your left side. If you're left-handed, they'd be pointed to your right side. So
Okay,
going both ways. G,
that's G.
that is G, yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, orientation of the letter G can either point straight out this way, but I tend to turn it a little bit this way.
Okay,
So, and then the letter H points that same way. It's your pointer finger and your tall man.
okay,
And make
that's
sure
H.
that if you're right-handed, you're pointing to your left, and if you're left-handed, it's pointing to your right. That is H.
Mhm. And then P,
And then P is the same hand shape as the letter K, where you've got your pointer finger sticking up, your tall man middle finger pointing outwards, and your thumb is in between the two. And then you point it down for the letter P. So this is the letter K, and pointed down, or where your pointer finger is pointing straight away from you, is the
Okay.
letter P. And the only way that, or one way that I kept it straight is kitchen patrol, the letter K and then the letter P. So,
Okay, thank you. Oh,
Yeah.
wait, Q.
and then Q, now here's the a way I remember that. So remember G was pointing, if you're right-handed, pointing to your left, left-handed, pointing to your right. Q, you turn up so that both fingers are pointing down to the floor.
Okay,
Maybe a little hard to see my hand there, but Q. And that one, the little mental trick I use is gentleman's quarterly, GQ. So the G is the one that, points
okay.
towards your left side or towards your right side, and the Q points down.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I see there's
Beth-
another question in the chat. Oh, okay. So maybe Linda, if you use a mirror, put your ABC sheet against a mirror, maybe that'll help.
So the other Linda. Yeah.
Yeah, Linda Byrne.
Thank you. That's a good idea. Thank you.
It's a good
Yeah.
idea. Also,
That's
Beth,
all.
there's a question from Anne in the chat asking if the governor's interpreter is saying whole words or something different.
Yes, they are, if there is not a sign for a word or a concept, then that is usually spelled. But yeah, the governor's interpreters are colleagues of mine that are doing a phenomenal job. I know that they've been open to criticism on social media. Some for looking angry when it sounds like the governor is not angry. However, again, it's part of that facial expression. There's reasons why in sign language where my eyebrows will go up, and there's reasons why my eyebrows will go down. One of those are what we call WH questions, or the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Our eyebrows are supposed to be down for those. So it's not like I'm mad, but it's a question face, like who, what, where, eyebrows should be down. So that's just one of those rules. But yes, they are interpreting full words, phrases, essentially what she is saying, just flipped in American Sign Language. So
I have a question about the origins or the applications of some of the signs, because I found it fascinating when you mentioned football and basketball, but I'd look at some of the signals like the victory in Churchill, and the use of the V. Now, he may not be the one that originates it, but it's the one that comes to mind. And again, he was doing that out in crowds where he probably couldn't be heard necessarily, but it said everything, just that one symbol. So are there any other illustrations that you or others in the class have of either the creation of the symbol that's then used in sign language or the application of some of these sign language, the alphabet in more recent applications? I think that's fascinating.
yeah, I can't say that there is a story necessarily for every single sign.
Right.
But I do know that a lot of them are, like the sign for ball, for instance, is just like I'm holding on to a ball, and because it looks like, that particular shape, you can make a ball big or small, but a lot of it is visually and used. The sign, some signs come out of, sometimes they can be a little insulting, just
Right.
because the deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind population tends to be very blunt and very open. So I do have some signs I would like to teach you, some general ones before we leave today. But one of them, the insulting one that I was talking about, is the sign for American. Is you lace your fingers together and you bring it out and around. So that's America. And the reason why it came about is because we tend to be a larger population in size. So that's unfortunately that sign. However, if I go to some other country signs, the first sign for Germany, for instance, kind of makes the swastika flag. So that seems, insulting. But again, when that sign was developed, that was the time. And so that sign has actually evolved. Instead of being this for Germany, it's now this, which is an indication, I believe, of the helmets with the spike on top of it. So again, it's another, could be taken as insulting, but it's more of a, this is what we see. And this is, how I'm going to sign what the country sign is. So, but let me teach you, if I can rein it back on in a minute, I'd like to teach you some basic conversational signs. So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint on my end for a minute. I'm not going to share my screen, but, oh, actually I am. I do want to share my screen for a second because I want to show you.
You see?
And put that here. There we go. This is Brenda Cartwright. She was my sign language professor at Lansing Community College who had deaf parents. And so I would just like to show you that sign for your turn. So that's what I meant to show you earlier, but it's your turn now to practice some other signs. So we practiced some spelling, but this is a list I have of basic signs that I would like to show you. So hopefully you can all see me on your screens, but I'd like you to practice along with me. This is the sign for hello. It's almost like a salute, although the opposite way rather than back, it's out away from you is hello. And then the sign for goodbye is that, just a wave your, so hello, opposite of salute, and then goodbye. Sign for how are you? Okay, remember I taught you those Y hands? So if you can make a Y in both of your hands, and then I want you to face them together and twist them. How you. So that's the sign. So you take your Y hands, face them together, twist them again. How are you? So let's see, the next one I have is my name is. So now that you've learned, hopefully, to spell your names, you would sign my, so your hand on your chest over your heart, my. The sign for name takes the H's. So if you make H's with both of your hands, and then with the one that you write with, tap it twice over your other one. That is the sign for name. So my name, and then you would spell it. And for me, it's B-E-T-H. The sign for nice to meet you only has two signs. So you're going to take your flat hands, the one you don't write with, have your palm facing up to the ceiling, and the other one will brush along top of it. So that's the sign for nice. And then take your D hands and meet them. Your active one, the one you write with, that D hand will meet the other one. So again, flat hands, nice to meet you. And let's see. So you could sign that differently, but in ASL, that's all you need to do is sign the word nice. And then the motion of one person meeting another person is essentially meet you. And they don't use the word to. And then let's see, the sign for please. So remember the sign for my. If you take that hand and make a circular motion, that is the sign for please. And then the next one, same flat hand, put it on your chin and bring it out. Thank you. So hand on your chin, out, almost like you're blowing a kiss. Thank you. The sign for your welcome is you'll take that flat hand, but you're gonna kind of bend it a little bit, not like your C, but just kind of bend it. And start with your palm facing down. And then make a big C away from you and back into your body. You're welcome. So good. I'm seeing a few of you. I don't see everyone, but I see a few of you. So yeah, just rather than a flat hand, you're going to curve it a little bit, palm facing the floor, and you'll make a big outward C away from you and back into you for your welcome. And my last three I think I have on here, a really good one in case of emergency is, do you need help? So this is the sign for help. So you've got your non-dominant or non-writing hand with the palm facing up. And then you're making that letter A, although the thumb sticks up a little bit. And you're going to put it on the palm and hold it up. Help. So there's a sign for help. And then the sign for sorry, we make that letter S. Put it on your chest where you did, my and please, but instead with an S hand, you're going to make a circular motion. And of course, your face should be showing that you're sorry also. Sorry. And then one last one I wanted to show you is the sign for slow, as if someone starts signing really quickly to you, you'll want to tell them to slow down. So if you put out your non-dominant arm and then take your writing hand flat, start at the back of your hand and pull it back on your arm. That is slow. So like slow down. So I'll go back. Let's review all of those. So the sign for hello, hello, opposite of salute, goodbye. How are you? How you? My name is, my name, the H hands. And then nice to meet you is nice to meet you. And then please, flat hand on your chest in a circular motion. Thank you. You're welcome. Help. Sorry, S hand on your chest, circular, sorry. And then you're probably all wanting to tell me to slow down, slow. All right. Let me, I don't think I had any more. Oh yeah, then I wanted you to practice again, but let's see. All right. We do have some time left, so I wonder if we can do a breakout room again. We could practice signing, hello, my name is, nice to meet you, and goodbye. I wonder if we can practice that. I know I went fast, but.
Beth, one other question came in.
Yes.
From Shay. She saw a special yesterday that talked about ASL and the Black sign language being different. Did you learn both, or are you familiar with the differences?
I am learning the differences because there is a dialect of Black ASL. And from what I understand, it's more of a two-handed, like they'll use both of their hands to sign things, like instead of just father, they'll sign father, mother. So that's one difference. Their signing space is larger, typically, is another thing I've learned. And I've also learned, there are some specific signs, like I know this is the sign for the color black, but I've also seen them use the full B hand for black when referring to themselves and to their race, their color. So yeah, those are some things that I'm learning, and I'm learning more because for me, it's newer. I do feel it's important in my work as an interpreter to honor that with my clients, to not only, recognize it as they sign to me, but to sign that same sign back to them. So if they're going to sign father with two hands, I'm going to sign father with two hands. So, but yeah, very good question. And it's, I don't think I addressed it, but even around the United States, we all use American Sign Language, right? But there are what I would call dialects of sign language. For instance, the sign for garbage, it's one of the first things that pops into my head, but here in Michigan, you make that X sign and it's under your chin and throws it away from you. However, if you go just as far as Illinois, garbage is this sign here. And if you go to Missouri, garbage is this. So there's 3 different signs, same word, right? But there's different contexts. Another favorite story I like to tell, the sign for store. In most of the United States, this is the sign for store. And it's the basically sign also for sell. But in Michigan, this is the sign for store. Now, why it's so different, it's not this, like to sell, is because of the students at Michigan School for the Deaf. There was a store right near the school that used to have, maybe still has, a totem pole there. And so when the students at Michigan School for the Deaf said, I want to go to the store, they would say, I want to go to the Indian. And this is their sign for Indian. And then over time, that sign evolved from Indian, and these 3 fingers went down, and then store. So I do see people that will sign store. And I know that it's from here in Michigan, and it's because of that, of the students from Michigan School for the Deaf. So
My question related to that then, Beth, is how do you learn and know these differentiations? Like, is there a site or a place where people who are signers go to get these updates?
So I continually improve my skills as a sign language interpreter. I have to, much like teachers do, I need to earn CEUs, continuing education. And so by going to workshops, earning those units, I will pick up on some of those things.
Okay.
Others, life experience, like someone will sign this and I'll go, what's that? Oh, S-T-O-R-E. Oh, store. Okay. And that's how I pick it up. And otherwise, when I used to work for Sorensen in the video relay service, we had calls from all over the United States and some from other countries. So that's another place that I learned the sign for tire, I think Arizona and out west, they will use that because like the sign like here is rubber, and I think when they puff out their cheek and have that like open A hand, that's how they sign tire there. However, here in Michigan and I believe the east side, it's just the circle tire, like we're talking about cars. Tire. So yeah, so some of the signs that I learned, and as well as there are different signs, there's different speeds of sign language. For instance, if you meet someone from New York, New Jersey, New England area, they tend to speak really quickly. Therefore, the signs from someone from there are generally very quick. But I had, well, again, when I worked for Sorensen, if I had someone from the South, Alabama, Mississippi, their signs were much more laid back and slower. And so those phone conversations would take longer than ones from the Northeast. So it's very fascinating. So you can't quite say that sign language is, well, you can't, period, say sign language is universal because each country has its own sign language. France, Germany, England, in fact. Yeah.
I was just going to say, is there an international sign language? I mean, this is ASL, but.
Right. There is one when international events happen, such as the Deaf Olympics, because they do have their own Olympics. They will use an international sign. It used to be called Gestuno, Gestuno, Gestuno. But I believe they call it an international sign. So instead of like, this is the sign for deaf as I learned it in school, either this way or this way, but they will use two fingers to indicate deafness internationally. So there is that, you know, we're all from different countries. So they had to come together and come up with some way to communicate. That would be the only international universal sign. But for example, even though I can understand someone who is British, because they do use English, you know, with some varying words, right? British Sign Language is something I could not interpret unless I studied more, because you know how we learned our A, B, C, D, E here today? The letter A is a point to the thumb instead of this A. The letter E is point to this finger instead of the letter E. So that's just what, you know, the letters is one, it's a completely different alphabet, and they use a lot of different signs. So
Thank you.
sure, you're welcome.
A couple more questions came in the chat, Beth. Someone is asking for you to tell us about your special mask you use.
Oh,
Oh,
Someone knows
I'm
something.
looking around. I don't have it on me right now. I do have one I used to use with me, but I use a see-through mask similar to this, so that when I wear it, and it's really bad, you can't even see, right? But my other mask, you can see. And I have been wearing that for assignments, just so that my deaf clients are able to read my mouth movements, not necessarily lip read, but some do. But it also, my mouth is part of the expressions that I make when I'm interpreting. So I ordered masks from theclearmask.com, and it's basically, there's styrofoam up here by my nose, styrofoam down here by my chin, and then it's all clear anti-fog plastic, and then it has straps so that are adjustable. So I do use that. I would have to leave my computer and go down a floor to bring it to that.
Okay. Another question is, where do you do most of your work, and how do people find you?
Very good question. So most of my work, I would say I do within about an hour to an hour and a half from Holland. I do work in Holland as well, but I tend to not work further than an hour and a half one way, just because of exhaustion factor for me personally. Work all over the state. I could work all over the country if I wanted to, but I prefer to work basically in West Michigan. And then how am I found? I have an email address that people could email me. My cell phone number, people could text me. But I also work through agencies. Probably my number one favorite agency is Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services, and they're based in Grand Rapids, but they serve probably 20 to 30 counties, mainly here on the west side of the state, but you know, they get further north, they get further south, and they're starting to get further east as well. And so through that agency, I could be contacted, and you know, if you need an interpreter for a situation. And there are some agencies I work for that are out of state that'll hear of a job, say in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And so they'll email me or text me and say, hey, can you do this assignment? And I'll respond and add to the assignment.
Another person just mentioned a book by Dr. Sachs called Seeing Voices. Is that a book you're familiar with and recommend?
Ooh. No, but I'll write that down.
And then I have a question, like, is there a concern among the deaf community when someone is signing like a governor's speech or anything really that's important, that the signer might be leaving something out intentionally or otherwise? Like, is that an innate concern that they have, that they might be sort of censoring the message?
I would say that there is a certain level of anxiety amongst the deaf community. Another history lesson, and I'll just try to be brief, is that sign language was developed and created, but was not always accepted. There was, I believe it's a Milan conference back in 1800 that decided that there was to be no more sign language. So then it was Alexander Graham Bell that came up with oralism, or deaf people only learning to lip read and not using any signs at all. And that was kind of quite a dark period in the deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind world, because, as I said before, it's very difficult to learn to speech read or to lip read, and with the most proficient really only getting 30% of what you're saying. And then sign language started to be accepted again. So but it's still deaf people feel very anxious, especially the older deaf generation that I work with. But for many years, rather than being central in a conversation, they've relied on family members and friends to kind of do the speaking for them. I still see this today, where family and friends will jump in and say, "Oh, don't talk to them, talk to me," which kind of rubs me the wrong way a bit. But that is what had been expected for a long time, is that if you went to the doctors, went to the lawyer, went to wherever, is that you would have a family member or friend with you helping you. So yeah, there is a lot of that. But years, and with clients that I have, we build up a trust between each other. And I, as an interpreter, follow a very strict code of ethics.
That's what I was going to ask next, if you had to.
7 pillars and several categories under those pillars. So I am obliged to give out everything that I hear, sign everything I hear, voice everything I see, because again, that falls under the code of ethics. Kind of like with doctors, the do no harm. We are similar in that realm, where if someone in the room says to me, "Oh, don't interpret that," my hands are already out there signing, "Don't interpret that," because they deserve to know that that's what that person just said. So I can't decide what they should be hearing and what they shouldn't be hearing. So does that help answer?
Yeah, that's really helpful. That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next question is there a statistic on how many of the deaf know sign language?
I don't know, and that might be hard to find, I would think. I've had several deaf clients over the years and now, and I can tell you the ones that are more proficient in sign language and the ones that really need the sign language to be broken down into very basic, or to figure out home signs. So not every deaf person knows sign language, but I don't have the statistics or numbers. I'm not quite sure where to find that either.
Okay.
Know that something else that I haven't mentioned is that, yep, I am a sign language interpreter, but I'm working with clients that have a difficulty in the language, whether they're language delayed or just haven't been exposed to as much. I work with deaf interpreters, which seems kind of odd, right? Why would I need a deaf interpreter with me, like both of us going on an assignment together? However, it's becoming much more common in the courtroom to have two, a hearing interpreter as myself and a deaf interpreter. But it's also more than what happens in my situation are appointments where the client is language delayed or have minimal language skills, where I can feed my deaf interpreter what's being said, and the deaf interpreter can break it right down. And then we have communication that happens. So I really enjoy working with deaf interpreters, and more, we only have maybe one officially certified deaf interpreter in the state of Michigan, but there are certified deaf interpreters that have taken tests and work full time around the United States. So we're hoping, there has been a little bit of a hold in the testing, partially due to coronavirus, partially due to rewriting of tests, but
Wow.
hoping to have more because we need them.
Right. That's everything I have in the chat for now. So I don't, maybe if you want to spend the last few minutes here reviewing the conversational signs again.
Sign? Yep, sure, sure. All right, so I'm gonna have to go back to my list so I don't forget anything. Let's see. I'm gonna share my screen again. And go back. Here we go. All right, so to review, time for hello, goodbye, how are you? Make your Y hands, face them, twist them again. How are you? My name is nice, your flat hands, nice. And then your D hands, to meet you. Flat hand, please, in a circular motion. Thank you. Bend your hand a little. You're welcome. Big C back to yourself, you're welcome. Help. S hand, sorry. And then slow down. All right. I went through that pretty quickly.
Can you do help again? It seems like that would be a really important one to know if you were trying to assist a deaf person.
Yes.
What does that
So
look like again?
I'll show you help again. So your non-writing hand, I call non-dominant hand, palm facing up. Make your A hand and open that thumb a little bit more and put that A hand on that hand. And I usually push up or push out towards the person. Help.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, awesome. A couple more questions just came in. Do you know what the percentage of the deaf population is in the US and whether that number has remained stable or grown or decreased over time?
Again, I wish I knew. I do know that there are more deaf people than there are interpreters in general. So I do know that this is a field that we would love to have more interpreters because I am kept very busy. Ask my family, they know that I am kept very busy because there is a need, a lot of need out there.
Mhm.
So again, I would have to look it up on Google to check statistics. And that was one of the debates when doing the 2020 census is, could there be a question put on there on the census, whether are you deaf, hard of hearing, could you put that down? And I'm not sure that made it onto the census, but it was a wonderful thing to know.
Mhm.
But I believe that surveys have happened in some form. But I don't have in front of me, I would have to Google like how many deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind individuals live in Michigan, live in the United States, live in other countries. It would have to be something to look up.
Mhm.
Beth,
then
I'm sorry, I must have missed this, but would you explain again the difference between what you do and a deaf interpreter does?
Oh, sure. So what I do is, as a sign language interpreter, is whatever is being said, I sign. And whatever I see my deaf client sign, I speak or I voice. So in certain situations where my deaf client, maybe I'm not able to understand them 100% because of a language delay or the need to really break down the language to figure out what they're talking about, that's when a deaf interpreter can work with me in order to make sure that whoever's involved in our conversation, whether it's a doctor, whether it's disability advocates, or if it's, somewhere, that we all can make sure we understand each other. So I will, in that case, what's being said, I will listen to it, I will sign it. The deaf interpreter will, see what I have signed, break it down even further for the deaf client. And then the three of us kind of work together to make sure that the deaf client is being heard and understood.
Thank you.
I've got a comment. I've got a grandson who was born deaf, but he's got a cochlear implant. He's actually got 2 cochlear implants. And some deaf people do not like cochlear implants because it's as if there's something wrong with them that they have to have a cochlear implant. But one of the issues with him, he's a high school senior, and some of his understanding is through lip reading. And so you got a mask and he doesn't have that little element, right? Also got a niece who went to Gallaudet College, who was born deaf, married a guy she met there.
Yeah, so we could talk for another half an hour or so about the debate between cochlear implants, whether to use them or not.
Right.
Because again, to that capital D deaf community that I was talking about,
Right.
they value being deaf, which seems kind of odd. Like we would think, oh my goodness, wouldn't you want to hear? Right. But if you are born deaf, you've not experienced that. So you don't have that same, desire to hear. And then in fact, some deaf adults that have received a cochlear implant, hearing for the first time, can be very overwhelming. Hearing your footsteps on the floor, hearing the heater, hearing the wind blow, or not, I don't know that that's much of an issue, but really, I think wind blowing and hearing aids can sometimes be amplified, if I understand correctly. So, it's just, there's a lot of this input. And when you're hearing for the first time, from what I understand, can be very confusing. You really have to practice and use a cochlear implant in order to know, oh, that sound I'm hearing is from my heater. Oh, that sound is someone knocking on my door. Oh, that sound is, you're learning every, not even just words, but you're hearing words. What is that word? Okay. And it's a training. So, but the debate is, you're taking me out of my culture by putting an implant on is the perception. So then you become that lower D deaf versus a capital D deaf. So there is a level of acceptance and non-acceptance if you get a cochlear implant. So I am of the mindset of what that individual would prefer, whatever works best for them. So I don't judge someone who walks in that I'm interpreting for if they're wearing a cochlear implant or not, or if they're wearing hearing aids or not. It's more of am I going to make the message clear for you? And is there going to be understanding in our situation today is really what makes the difference for me. But yeah, there is quite a large debate regarding cochlear implants, and there has been with the deaf community. Even how that is signed is different depending on your opinion of it. Because some people will sign cochlear implants, for example, with the letter V curled, and that is much more aggressive versus just the U hand, because that's another sign for cochlear implant, and that is not as aggressive. There's a negative connotation to the curled V cochlear implant versus the U hand shaped one sign for that.
My niece, who was deaf, was not happy when our grandson got cochlear implant, but she finally adjusted to it. But it took
Mhm.
her a few years before she really accepted the fact that it was
Mhm.
okay.
That is common. That is common. So.
Okay,
Yeah,
but there's also a question, it may have gotten cut off, but I think it's asking where would a deaf kindergartner go for school or to learn sign?
that's a good question. So in every county, there is one school system that has a deaf and hard of hearing program. So for Ottawa County, that is Holland Public Schools. So they are the one school that has a program which would include a deaf ed teacher, a teacher consultant, a speech therapist, pretty much anything that they would need. So in Kent County, that is Northview Public Schools. So if they live in Kent County, they would go there. If they live in Ottawa County, they would go to Holland. And then each county in the state of Michigan, I believe, has one. So unless, I know that Dearborn Public Schools, where I started in the Detroit area, their program has been shut down from what I understand. So those kids in that area are going to different places. But that is how it was set up, was that each county would have their own one school system where the students would tend to go. There are exceptions to that, which I can't mention due to HIPAA, or not HIPAA, but FERPA. But at any rate. Question. So like, if that person that knows the kindergartner that's deaf wanted to know, I would hope that a teacher consultant has been involved in some way. I think that once hearing loss is identified in children, usually that consultant comes in and it's I think that your child would be a better suited learning sign language or having hearing aids and orally. So.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, it's 10:58. If anyone else has any other comments or questions, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask those of Beth now. Otherwise, we will wrap up in a moment.
Beth Tegvin-Grau, I have a question. Do colleges typically accept ASL as a foreign language credit?
I would have to say it depends on the college. There are some colleges that do accept it as a foreign language and some that do not. I can't speak to all of them, but that would be on an individual college level basis. It certainly can be argued that American Sign Language is a language that has syntax and grammar. And unfortunately, there are still some colleges and places that do not recognize it as a language.
Thank you for answering.
Mhm.
Anybody else? Just a comment that this was excellent and what a great job you did, Beth.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
It was
you.
wonderful, Beth.
Mhm.
Yes, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy, do you want to wrap us up? Kathy Walton? You're muted, hon.
Okay, yes, sure. Well, I would just say thank you to Beth. It was indeed a wonderful, wonderful presentation. And I think we've all learned a lot and we all enjoyed it. So thank you.
It's awesome. Thanks so much, Beth.
Bye.
All right, again, if anybody still needs the handout, email me at haspethope and I'll make sure I get it to you. Otherwise, have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Beth.
Mhm.